Today we'll be learning about while loops and nested loops. So first, I want to talk about generating a random number. So generating a random number becomes important when you want to create games or have a random number that the computer generates for the user. And one way to implement this is in your Choose Your Own Adventure game, where you could have the computer generate a random number, and with this random number, this number correlates to one choice, right? So how to generate a random number? At the very top of our code, we have to write import random. So if we don't write this, then if we want to generate a random number, it won't work. So at the top, we have import random. We have import random, and then we can set a variable equal to random.randint 1 through 10. So 1 through 10 gives a parameter for the computer. So the computer is going to think, okay, now I'm going to choose a random number between 1 and 10, an integer between 1 and 10. So when we print num, we'll just get a random number. So let's try this out on our own Replit. You guys can also open your own Replit to try out this random number. Random numbers. So at the top, with our new Replit, we want to write import random. At the very top, that's the first thing that we're going to do. Now we can call our variable random for just a name. And we have to copy what this says. We have to do random.randint, so equals random.randint with parentheses, the parameters that we want. So let's say we want a random number from 1 through 100. So I write 1, 100. And then we have to print random so we can actually have a result. So if I run the program, 23 is the random number. And every time I run it, if I run it again, I get a different number, like 20. So for those of you who joined, we're just going over random numbers. So we
Okay, so it can make any number to 1,100, right?
yeah, I can make it as big as I want. I can make it to like 2,000
Okay,
or see, now I get
that's a large number. But it chooses a random number every time. So does it naturally just think of the easiest number and puts it on the screen?
yeah, the computer uses like whatever strategy that they have to choose a random number every time. So this becomes helpful when you like write your Choose Your Own Adventure games. So one application of this could be using if statements. So if I write if random num, first of all, let's change the parameters to 1, 2, 3. And
Okay.
Jacob, in the chat, if you can't hear anything, maybe try rejoining. I think everyone else is hearing okay.
Or maybe that your audio's off.
Right. So if we use if statements and random numbers, we can do if random num is equal to 1, then we can print equals to 1. We can print your choice is to pet the dog or run away, right? Or when we use elif statements, we can have elif random num is equal to 2, print your your choice is to go to Target or stay home. And since we set the parameters to 1 to 3, we have to have a third elif statement. So elif random num is equal to 3, then another choice. Your choice is to drink water or juice. It can be whatever you want.
Water.
Okay, water. So if we run the program, we have the random number is randomly 3. So if random number is equal to 3, then the computer will print your choices to drink juice or water. So you guys can copy this code down if you haven't already, and you can sort of manipulate it and customize it however you want.
But I can't copy and paste it off the screen.
Okay, I'll copy the code and put it into the slides. So you guys can copy and paste it on the slides if you want. This is just one example of how you can implement random numbers into your code. So if you guys are interested, you can add more to your Choose Adventure game with the random numbers. So then it's not just as boring as you only get one choice every time. Okay, so after random numbers, we're going to learn about while loops. A while loop is a portion of the program that is run multiple times as long as a certain condition is met. So we don't know how many times the program is going to run, but it is going to run as long as this certain condition is true. So in Python, we have two different kinds of loops. We have a for loop and a while loop. Today, we're going to learn about while loops, and next week, we're going to talk about for loops. So like I said earlier, the while loop will repeatedly run while a condition is met. So like while a Boolean expression, then we're going to execute these lines of codes. So how a while loop syntax looks, we have the word while with a Boolean expression and a colon. It's important to remember that we always have a colon after our if statements, our elif statements, else, and while loops. And of course, the lines underneath the while loop are always indented, like they are in if statements. So our program in while loops, it will evaluate the conditional expression. So if this Boolean expression is false, then the program will skip over the loop entirely. But if the condition is true, then the computer is going to run all of the statements that are inside the loop. So if it's false, then nothing is going to run in the while loop. Instead, we're just going to skip over and do what's next in the code. So similar to elif statements and if statements, right? So here's an example with while loops. Right here, we first set a variable to x, and while x is less than 10, colon, then we're going to print this is a loop. And then we have x plus equals 1. So first of all, plus equals is just the Python way of saying what x equals x plus 1. So I'm going to copy this code onto my Replit that I was working on before, so you guys can do the same thing. So x equals 10, while while x, let's change x equal to 1 so we can have a better result. So x is equal to 1, and while x is less than 10, print that this is while loop. And then we want x plus equals 1. Or basically, it's just what x equals x plus 1. So every time we print this statement, we are going to increase x by 1. I'll copy this code onto the slide. So if you guys are a copy paster, easier. So it's on the side. So right now we have this portion of code. Now let's run our program to see what happens. Okay, that's interesting. So we have a bunch of this is a while loops. The reason we have so many of the same statements is because every time x is less than 10, the program is going to run. And we start at x is equal to 1, and we go all the way until x is equal to 9. So when x is equal to 9, then the program will think, is 9 less than 10? Yes, so we're going to print this is a while loop, and we're going to do x plus 1, which is 10. Now the program is going to repeat, and we're going to ask, is 10 less than 10? It is not. So we're not going to run what's inside the while loop. We're going to skip it. And that's it for this program. So for x equals x plus 1, we are basically incrementing x by 1. So if x is equal to 2, then if we have x equal to x plus 1, the new x is going to be 3 because 2 plus 1 is 3. So how it works over here is it's going to take the value of x that we have right now and is going to add 1 to it. And the new value, the plus 1 value, is going to be the x value instead. So basically, every time we go through the while loop, x will be greater by 1 because we add 1. So you can change the value of x or change what is inside the while loop, but essentially we are looping through something and it's going to loop through while a condition is met. So counter variables. The while loop example that we just did uses a counter variable. And these are really common when you use while loops because you want to test if a certain counter variable meets a condition. So here's a more detailed summary of how a while loop is coded. First, we want to declare the counter variable. So x equals 0 or whatever name you want equals some value. And then we have our while loop. We have our while, and a condition. And then inside the while loop, we want to write statements that the while loop is going to execute if the condition is met. And I think what is the most important part is number 4 on the diagram, the modification step. So we want to modify the counter variable by a certain amount to let it approach the breaking condition quicker. So in simpler words, we always want to add something or subtract something to our variable in order to make it closer to breaking the condition. So in the example that on the screen, we have x equal to 0, while x is less than 10, then do this, and then x equals x plus 1. So we want to add 1 to x. So when we add 1 to x, x gets bigger. And slowly we'll add more and more to x so that x will no longer be less than 10. Once x is no longer less than 10, then the while loop will stop and it will no longer run what's inside. So infinite loops are something that we want to watch out for when we're writing while loops. When we don't have a modification variable, like when we don't add something or subtract something to the variable, then the program is going to run forever and it's going to essentially crash.
So, like an infinite loop, it basically goes on forever, forever, and forever until something interrupts it.
Right.
Can you
that's
like
exactly.
show that to see what will happen if you accidentally do that?
Yes, I will. So, good job, Tim. So the reason it will continue going on forever and ever because the condition will always be true. So in the example here, x equals to 1, while x is equal to 1, then do this. But the thing is, x will always be equal to 1. So this will just print an infinite amount of statements. So I'll show you guys on my code. So let's say we have a variable called number. And if we have number equal to 3, while number is equal to 3, then print this is an infinite loop. Infinite loop. Okay. So we don't have a step here where we do number plus equals 1 or something. So this is why it's going to go on forever. So now let's run the program and see. This is basically what happens. It just keeps on going with no end unless you stop it. So that's an infinite loop. See, it goes on forever and ever and ever. And that's not good. You most definitely never want that in your code. So always remember to change your variable by something so that the condition will eventually be false and the program will eventually stop. So basically the same thing. We want to create something that the condition will eventually be false. So when the condition is eventually false, then the program will stop. So now we're going to talk about Sentinel variables. So another method to terminate a while loop is to use a Sentinel variable. These variables, the only purpose that they have is to stop the loop. Sentinel variables are usually Boolean variables. So Boolean meaning true or false. So in the example on the bottom left, we have our counter variable, or we have our x, right, that we will increase. So x is equal to 0, and we have another variable called keep looping. Let's make it equal to true. And while keep looping, how do we interpret that? That might be a little confusing to think about since we just have a variable and no like less than sign or greater than sign. So basically, while keep looping just means that while keep looping is true, then do this. So like while true, that's basically what it is saying. While true, then do the things inside. So the things inside, we have our print statement and we want to increase X. So we increase X by 1 every time. And then we have an if statement inside a while loop. So it is perfectly okay to have if statements, elif statements, and else statements inside a while loop. So if X is equal to 10, then keep looping is equal to false. So when X is equal to 10, then the while loop will stop running. So essentially, if the variable has exceeded the limit that we set, then we
Okay,
will stop the loop from running.
excuse me.
Yeah,
Okay, so a sentient variable like deletes any loops happening, right?
right. So it's just another way to stop the loop.
It's just another way to stop the loop besides like shutting it down.
Yeah. So like the example here we have, if keep looping is true, then keep on going, keep on executing. But eventually we set keep looping equal to false. So then the while loop will think while keep looping, but keep looping is false. So if it's false, then we can't run it. We're going to stop, no more code. Do we understand? Okay, so now let's do some practice. Feel free to open a new Replit or just use the one that we have been practicing on. So here are the programs that we're going to make. So first, let's make a program that prints the numbers 1 through 10 using a while loop. And then once you finish with that, we can make a program that asks the user for numbers until they enter 0. So when 0 is entered, then it prints out the sum of all the numbers. Number 1 is more basic. It's sort of what we talked about before. Number 2 is a little bit harder. It involves using the input statement that we learned last week, and also using if statements and else statements. So let's work until, let's say 8:35. Or if we finish sooner, we can come back and review sooner. If you have any questions on how to get started, or if you're just sort of stuck, feel free to unmute or send something in the chat. You know, we're always here to help.
What was the first exercise again?
The first exercise is to make a program that prints the numbers 1 through 10 in a while loop. Oh yeah, I live in the East Coast, so it's 8:29 right now for me. So, so if you guys live in like California, we'll work until 5:35 or longer if you guys need it. I'm going to start doing number 2, the asking for users input on the screen right now. So if you guys want to follow along, I'm going to show you how to get started on that. So for number 2, here's one way that you could get started. We want to first state our sum variable. We want to first call it 0 since we haven't added anything yet. And we're going to use a true or false Boolean variable let's call it keep going. And while keep going, inside our while loop, we're going to ask for the user's input and add their input to the sum. So let's see if you can figure out how to do that.
Wait, what was the question again?
For the first one, we want to print 1 through 10. For the second one, it's on the slides if you want to reference it on your own. We're going to use while loops to ask the user for numbers until they enter 0. So if they enter 0, then we're going to print out the sum of all the numbers that they entered before. Okay, Jacob, I see your code. Is that the one that you're having trouble with? We can troubleshoot it together. We're gonna go over the answers, but if you want, you can put it in the chat and we can try to see what's wrong with it. Okay, so let's first go over number 1 and then we can talk about the harder one, number 2. So we're going to make a program that prints the numbers 1 through 10. So on the next slide are the answers. So number 1 is pretty similar to the examples that we saw. We're going to call a variable x is equal to 1. And using a while loop, we have while x is less than or equal to 10, print x. And to avoid having an infinite loop, we want to add x by a certain number. In our case, we want to add x by 1 so that we can get consecutive numbers. X plus equals 1, or you can write x is equal to x plus 1, same thing. So now let's print to see what's going on. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So hopefully you guys understand number 1. So now let's talk about number 2, which is trickier. So the answer is on the slide and we're going to talk about it. First, let's see Jacob's code. Thank you, Jacob, for sharing. That's really helpful so that we can see some of what we're doing. Cool, so we have z is equal to 0, y is equal to input write a number, and while y is not equal to 0, All right, I like your logic. I think you are in the right direction. Let's run our program to see what it's going to output. Write a number. Let's give it 2. And 3, 1, 0. So the thing is that when we enter 0, the program doesn't actually stop. Okay, so let's see if we change this part equals to z is equal to z plus into y. Let's see if that helps. Sometimes Python can just be picky like that. So it's best to try things out. All right, so that's not the issue. So let's cast the variable y into an integer. Let's see if this changes anything, because sometimes Python can be picky about if it's an integer versus a string. So now we have something. Now it does stop. So the reason it didn't stop before is because when we ask for an input statement, inputs will always be strings. So when we test in our while loop, we have y is not equal to 0. We can't compare a string and an integer. They must both be integers or both be strings. So now that we have y is equal to an integer, we have this condition all good. But now we have our addition to be wrong. It's supposed to be 5 because 3 plus 2 is 5, but instead we have 2 instead. Let's take a look at the example code and see if we can compare the examples to Jacob's. So I'm going to copy the answer into my Replit. Also, really good job, Jacob. This is really impressive. Total sum is equal to 0. So just like the code above. So in the example, in the answers, we're using a true or false variable. So while keep going is while keep going. So while this is true, then do this. Int of input, please enter the number. So we are adding the inputted number to our sum. And now we're going to use an if statement. If the next number, if the user's number is equal to 0, then keep going is going to be false. Let's see. And then at the end, we're going to print total sum. So essentially the answer in Jacob's code they have the same sort of format. Let's run it to see. All right. So so with Jacob's code, let's try putting in some other numbers. So it looks like it only returns the last number that we inputted. So I have to think about that a bit, but so we can always refer back to the answers that will work, and you can enter as many numbers as you want, and Python will add all of these numbers together, even if it's a really big number. So that's really cool about while loops. Thank you, Ethan. Wait, let's try Ethan's out to see the difference. So z is equal to 0. STF DFDF is equal to 1. Let's try running all 3 of these. Let's do the same thing. 19, 3, 2. 0. Ooh, that's interesting. I really like your code, Ethan. I like how it prints the sum out every time you add it. Good job. That's really nicely done. So now let's do a little review, week 1 to 3 review on Kahoot. Let me see how to. I've never actually like made a Kahoot. So let's see if this works. Okay. There it is. Start. So these questions are pretty simple. Play up to, how many people do we have? Play up to 20 people. So here's the game pin. To access Kahoot, you can just enter kahoot.it onto your Google search bar and put in the game pin. Yeah, we'll wait until most people are here, or if everyone is here.
Who's human?
Good
Who's
question.
human?
I didn't even notice that. Honestly, I thought that was someone's name. I thought it was like Hugh and Men. I didn't pay that close attention.
Who is human?
We have 13 people. We have 13 students in Zoom. Right now we only have 7. So if you want to join, it'll be fun. 30 more seconds, unless you're having loading issues. 30 more seconds and then we'll start. There's only 16 questions in this Kahoot, so I think it'll go pretty fast. We're gonna start the Kahoot. You can join as we're playing. Python week 3 review. How do I reassign a variable if I want y equals to 2 to be y equals to 9? So this is about reassigning. Okay, so we have y is equal to 9. So if we want to reassign in Python, we just want to declare the variable name is equal to the new value. So we don't need to have an arrow, or we don't need to combine the two numbers. We're just simply going to say our new value. So we're just going to say y is equal to 9. Scoreboard, human, anonymous human, first place. What data type is x equals to 100 with quotations? This is stuff we learned in week 1, so 2 weeks ago. We still use the terms like in this class and in future classes, so I hope you guys all get this right. The answer is a string. Boolean is either true or false. Strings always have quotations around them. Humans still holding on with then Ethan, Jason, Tim, and Bing Chen. You cannot add multiple strings together, true or false? Can you add 2 strings together? We touched on this last class, so we haven't talked about it today, but I think this was used in the homework last time. Oh, pretty split. So we can add 2 strings together. It's really simple. We just do, let me show you. When we want to add 2 strings together, we just have, for example, we have big plus, or we can use a comma, big dog. So when we print it, we have big dog printed on the screen. Jason with an answer streak of 3. Good job. Which is the correct way to print? I think this is a trick question because I think we all know this. Yep, good job. All right, Nora coming back to the scoreboard. I can change a variable that is a string into an integer and vice versa. So can I cast a variable? We just did this in our while loops, guys. So I'd be a little disappointed if you guys choose the wrong answer, but that's okay. It's all review. True. So I can change a string into an integer and an integer into a string. I do that by casting using str quotation, str parentheses, or int parentheses. Human, Ethan, Jason, Tim, and Nora. What will the program return if I print 23 not equal to 45? True or false? Good job. So 23 is not equal to 45. That is true. So we will get true. The exclamation mark means not, so not equal to. What will the program return if I print 99 equals to 99? Good job. It's false. All 7 of you got it. What will print? It'll print Johnny because Johnny is the new value for the variable. Ethan in first place now, and Kennedy on the leaderboard. How do you use an input statement? We just did this with our practice, so input asks for the user's value. Good job. We have input and in quotation marks. Whenever we have a print or an input statement, we always have quotation marks around the words that we want to print. In the code below, what will be printed? This was just a picture of code that I found on Google. So to the Jason who's in the class, that was just a coincidence. All right, so we have well, hello Jason, welcome. Ooh, big change. If I enter rainy, what will print? So this uses if statements and the input statement. Oops. Uh-oh. But carry an umbrella was the correct answer. If I enter snowing, what will print? Yes, it will print wear a cap because snowing is not one of the options, so the program will go to the else statement instead. What is the error in my code? So troubleshooting your errors and finding your bugs is a really important part of Python and coding in general. So if you can recognize your own errors, it makes your coding, it's a really good skill to have. Color is not defined, correct. What is the error in my code again? Ooh, lovely. We just went over this. Counter equals 0. We're using a while loop. What are we missing, or what did we do wrong? Or is nothing wrong? That is also an option. So I forgot to implement the counter variable. So I forgot to add 1 to the counter. So right now, if I printed what was in the picture, then it'll be an infinite loop. It'll go on forever because we didn't add anything. Nora with a high streak of 12 answers. Great job. Second to last question. What is the syntax for a while loop? I think this is a basic question, so this should have been earlier in the questions. Great job. No parentheses. We don't need parentheses in Python. We just have while x is less than 6. How do you feel about Python so far? Great job. That's really good to hear. I hope you guys are liking it. Let's see the podium. Third place, we have Ethan. Second place, Human, which we don't know who it is. First place, we have Nora. Good job, everyone. I hope it's a good review. Runner-up, we have Jason and Bing Chen. Human is Jacob. So let me cancel out. There's no more music. All right, so homework, we have the REPLs again that you can fork for practice. I think they also have some projects in there that are really interesting that I recommend doing. I think it's mostly just exercises this time, but last week's there were some like 8-ball projects that I think were really fun. Extra practice. Oh, here are some projects in the extra practice. Oh yeah, some things about staircases and user inputs and factorials. Fun stuff, you guys. Okay, big news, project alert. Rock, paper, scissors, but in Python. So here's your first official project, if you want to put it like that. So here's a replit that you can fork if you want to get started. So here are some of the hints. There is an answer key. Here's how I made the rock, paper, scissors game. I really recommend you trying it on your own because everyone has their own ways of coding. So what I make might not be exactly what you code. And it's really fun. And you can share it with your family and friends and show them your new Python accomplishment. And Google has a lot of resources if you want some more tutorials on rock, paper, scissors. But if you guys need help, you can always email me, put my email in the classroom, or you can leave a class comment in the assignment that I'm going to make. But I really recommend you guys doing the homework and the project. So that's it. You guys have mastered while loops, and always feel free to do the practices and the projects from the previous weeks. Those are always really helpful. And thank you guys for coming today. I'm excited to see your rock, paper, scissors projects. If you have any questions, you can ask. But if not, that's it for today. Bye, guys.